Hey, welcome to Q&A, where you ask your questions on faith and life, and I do my best to give a biblical perspective. Well, we have a good question. Let me bring it up here, and let's jump in, shall we? It's to do with a very controversial figure that's kicking around on social media at the moment. Here's the question: is it likely that Abba al-Sadiq Abdullah Hashem is the Antichrist, or is he more likely to be a Christ impersonator from Matthew 24? Well, right off the bat, let me say that I don't know a great deal about him, about Abdullah Hashem, except from what I've seen in the videos that are floating around, where he claims to be the successor of Muhammad, the successor of Jesus, the successor of Peter. And that's significant why he claims Peter, because in Roman Catholicism, Peter is the first pope. And this guy claims himself to be the true pope, the real pope. And in fact, I heard that he said that the death of St. Francis was a sign that from God, that he's making room for him to take his rightful position. But as a consequence of these claims, and he's certainly a very charismatic figure, very eloquent, a great communicator, and he's drawing a following, no question of that. But as a consequence of the claims, people are beginning to question and ask, is he the Antichrist, the false Christ, the deceiver who stands in the place of Christ, or as you've asked in your question, the false Messiah, the Christ impersonator that Jesus refers to in Matthew 24? So to answer your question, I guess, let's just pause and what do the scriptures actually say? You've mentioned Matthew 24. So if we have a look and start with there, let's start in verse 23, where Jesus says, if anyone tells you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, don't believe it. For false messiahs, the Christ impersonators that you referred to, if this is your question, and false prophets will rise up and perform great signs and wonders, so as to deceive, if possible, even God's chosen ones, Christians, people who have committed themselves to following the lordship of Jesus. See, I've warned you about this ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, look, the Messiah is out in the desert, don't bother to go and look. Or look, he's hiding here, don't believe it. Why? For as the lightning flashes in the east and shines in the west, so it will be when the Son of Man comes. So, first and foremost, you need to recognize what Jesus is saying here, that his return will be clear and unequivocal. There'll be no mistake when he returns. So if someone claims to be the Messiah and we haven't seen it, it hasn't been clear and unequivocal, returning, we haven't seen it in the sky, then we know that that's not Jesus. So we know that it's maybe a false Messiah, someone claiming to be the Messiah. So he's a false Messiah, could be a false prophet. So we know that right from the beginning. Now, it's important to note that this guy claims to be the Mahdi, which is the Muslim Messiah. So he could be a false Messiah in terms of what Jesus has laid out here. Another verse to consider, a passage to consider, there's a lot of scriptures about the Antichrist, but we don't have time to canvass them all. But I think a good one to think about is 1 John 2:18, where John says that you've heard that the Antichrist is coming, the false Christ, the one who stands in the place of Christ. He is going to come. But he says, even now, before he's come, there are many antichrists. Now, he makes a distinction between the many and the one. What's the distinction? Well, the many antichrists are simply those who are opposed to Christ. They are an antichrist. The antichrist is the false Christ, the one who stands in his place. And so these two verses give us an insight into perhaps how we might begin to think of this guy, Abdullah Hashem. I say that because in Islam, there's this belief that the Mahdi, the Muslim Messiah, will come as a ruler. And according to the tradition, when he comes, he will appear alongside of Jesus because Jesus is his assistant. And that as his assistant, Jesus will declare himself a Muslim, and he will kill any Christians who do not convert. And so to answer your question, is it likely that Abdullah Hashem is the Antichrist, or more likely to be a false Messiah or an Antichrist? I think he's a false prophet. He's not claiming to be the Messiah. He's not claiming to be Christ. He's saying he's the successor to him, because remember, in Muslim thinking, that Jesus is the assistant. He serves, if I could describe it that way, the Mahdi. And this guy claims to be the Mahdi. And so that would not make him a false Messiah. It would make him a false prophet, in the order, perhaps, of an Antichrist, one who opposes Christ. But because he's not claiming to be Christ, I wouldn't call him a false Messiah or the Antichrist. I find it interesting that he uses the language of Christianity, of Islam and Judaism in a way, I think it's a deliberate ploy on his part, because he's very eloquent, and I think he uses the language this way to try and unite people in the deception, in order to lead people, Christians particularly, away from the truth, away from Christ. And that's just what Jesus warned would happen with false prophets, for example, in Matthew 24. I've also heard that he's claimed to have done many miracles, and he's fulfilled many prophecies. Again, this is what Jesus says false prophets would do in Matthew 24, which is why I think he's a false prophet in this context, an Antichrist, one who is opposed to Christ, but I don't see him as the false Messiah. I don't see him as the Antichrist. But hey, as I say, I don't know a great deal about him. I've just started to have a look at him as a consequence of this question popping up. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any update, I'll post it if my views change. But hey, as always, if you've got questions on faith and life, jump over to slido.com, use the hashtag askhamish. We'll love to hear from you. But that's it for now. Until next time, God bless.